Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and today we're going to go over my 53-man preseason roster predictions. We have 2 preseason games now in the book, have a much better idea as to where the roster may stand because cut down day is in less than 10 days. San Francisco has until August 26th to cut their roster down from 90 to 53 men. And I'm going to give it my best opportunity, my best go today. We are going to predict the San Francisco 49ers 53-man roster, including PUP list, IR players, and a complete and full practice squad. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Leave us that 5-star audio review. I want to say what's up to Khalil Young in the YouTube chat and Strawberry Reacts. They both say, what's up, Sterling? What's up? Both back to you guys. Hope you're having a great Monday evening. And let's dive in to my preseason edition of my 53-man roster predictions. And let's start things off at the quarterback position. I mean, what else is there really to say? We know who the guys are going to be at the quarterback position this year for the San Francisco 49ers. We obviously have Brock Purdy, who looked really good in his preseason debut this year against the Las Vegas Raiders this past Saturday. And of course, behind him, you have Mac Jones. I don't think that's polarizing or that's too controversial to say. Both those guys are making the roster, and both those guys will be your quarterback 1 and quarterback 2 to begin the season. Behind them, though, no longer do we have Tanner Mordecai making the practice squad. We have Curtis Rourke, 7th-round pick this year at Indiana, on the PUP list and redshirting the season. And behind him, if he ever comes back this year, I don't think he will, but I have Carter Bradley, the Nepo baby himself, making the practice squad. A much better performance from Carter Bradley against the Raiders, and I don't think they're in a position to be cutting a third emergency quarterback unless someone else gets cut around the NFL. I think Carter Bradley is kind of slotted in as that quarterback 3 this season. I do want to say this, that I believe Carter Bradley's spot, albeit I do think is safe as the emergency quarterback 3 practice squad quarterback to begin the year. His job is not safe. Like, that is a position. Obviously, being a third-string quarterback, that will easily change as the year goes on, especially if guys get cut throughout the year or whatnot, or after roster cutdown day. I can easily see San Francisco swapping out Carter Bradley for somebody else. So right now, kind of a placeholder, but with Gus Bradley in the building, the Nepo baby gets to keep his job for a few more weeks. And let's move on down to the running back position on the depth chart, which I do think it's gotten more complicated because of the injuries with or to Isaac Guerendo and to Jordan James. I'm expecting both of those guys to be back by week 1. So my 4 running backs right now to make the roster, which may change next week after preseason week 3, is Christian McCaffrey, obviously the offensive player of the year a couple years ago. He's making the roster. Duh. Isaac Guerendo, Jordan James, and I have Patrick Taylor Jr., but again, the high ankle sprain compared to a shoulder injury, so it does complicate things right now for San Francisco because you have Patrick Taylor Jr. as the slotted in RB4. I personally like Corey Kiner more as a player, as a running back, over Patrick Taylor Jr., but Corey Kiner has a high ankle sprain. Taylor Jr. has a shoulder injury, which could keep him out for a month, could be 2 weeks. I don't know. My assumption is Corey Kiner, that ankle looked pretty bad. He may be an IR or on injured reserve to begin the season, which would end his year altogether. Hope that's not the case. But right now I have them releasing Corey Kiner, bringing him back via the practice squad, and Patrick Taylor Jr. making the roster this year. But I do, like, if Corey Kiner's healthy, I'd much rather have the rookie out of Cincinnati be my 4th running back to begin the year. I also have Jeff Wilson Jr. making the practice squad as well. I think San Francisco, knowing injuries to Taylor and Kiner, probably be smart to keep someone else in that room. I think they would have liked it to be Amir Abdullah. He's also hurt. So Jeff Wilson Jr. had an amazing preseason debut, now back with San Francisco against Las Vegas this past Saturday. I think he stays. He's now the RB6 on the roster and looks healthier, looks slimmer and is moving pretty well. So my prediction is 4 guys make the roster outright: McCaffrey, Guerendo, James, Patrick Taylor Jr. Then I have Kiner, which could be IR or a practice squad spot. Then Jeff Wilson Jr. as the other practice squad running back. Unfortunately, you kind of got to have a lot of them this year, and San Francisco already knows that. So altogether, 6 guys making the roster via 53-man and practice squad this year, which I'm sure it will not be the end of it. They'll add more guys throughout the year because guys are always getting hurt in the backfield. So those are your 4 running backs plus your 2 practice squad players. Fullback, Kyle Juszczyk. What else is there? It's Kyle Juszczyk. What else can I say? The juice is loose. He was brought back during free agency after being cut in March. He's here to stay. I don't think we will see Kyle Juszczyk play for another team in his entire career. So he's back at fullback, obviously. But that brings us to maybe one of the most polarizing positions on the roster. And it really shouldn't be based on the talent on paper, but the wide receiver group has now become kind of like running back behind Christian McCaffrey, a question as to who's healthy, who can actually play, and who do you trust? Obviously, you're going to have guys like Brandon Aiyuk begin the season on the PUP list or IR, probably PUP, to begin the year. Then Demarcus Robinson will get suspended for 3-4 games. I don't really know what's happening there with that. So those 2 guys will make the roster, but will not count towards their final total roster spots. That leaves me 6 guys that will make the final 53-man roster, and nothing has really changed since my last prediction. This can change, though, dependent on what is the health of Jordan Watkins. So I have Jauan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, Russell Gage, Junior Bergen, and then Jordan Watkins. I think they're going to try to retain Robbie Chosen-Anderson on the practice squad. We heard yesterday that San Francisco was in the mix to acquire wide receiver John Mechie from the Houston Texans. He's now at Philadelphia. So maybe they acquire somebody else, but right now I don't think they are. They worked out 3 receivers today, which may change some stuff, but I'm a little uncertain as to where Jordan Watkins' health may be coming into preseason week 3, but it doesn't sound great. I don't think he will be ready by week 1, but if he's back by week 2, I think having Robbie Chosen-Anderson or Isaiah Hodgins be one of the practice squad wide receivers definitely helps you, and I think they're going to pick Robbie Chosen-Anderson over the other guys in that room. So Jennings, who he himself has an injury, we'll see if he's healthy. I think he will be back by week 1, but again, time will tell. Then there is Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, Jordan Watkins, Russell Gage, Junior Bergen. Those are your 6 receivers week 1 of the NFL season. Then Brandon Aiyuk, Demarcus Robinson on the PUP/suspended list. Then Robbie Chosen-Anderson rounding out as the sole wide receiver on the practice squad, which again, that could change. But right now, that's what I currently have as my prediction. And that brings us to tight ends, which I think we know who the top 2 tight ends are going to be, although Luke Farrell has not had the best preseason thus far, but it's George Kittle and it's going to be Luke Farrell as your 2 tight ends this season. Behind them, though, there is a battle for tight end 3 between Braden Willis and Jake Tunges. I do think that Braden Willis will make the roster, which is what I said in my last prediction, but I want to keep it the same here. Tunges has certainly been a better wide receiver during the preseason, which could lend to him being on the roster outright after roster cutdown day, but I believe they are going to keep Braden Willis. They already cut Ross Dwelley. I think they can retain Jake Tunges via the practice squad, which again is my exact same prediction from about a week ago. So Kittle, Farrell, Willis, and Jake Tunges are your tight ends this year. I believe they think Willis has a higher ceiling, albeit not very high, but if he does have a good preseason week 3 and can kind of round out a rather consistent training camp / preseason, I think Willis will solidify himself as the tight end 3 on the roster. Again, that can change. Guys go down. Willis doesn't feel like a guy they would be afraid to cut, so it could certainly change between him and Tunges, but I do think that Willis will kind of he'll kind of squeak this one out as the preseason ends next weekend, or this coming weekend actually, against the Chargers. But I do have Jake Tungus being the practice squad tight end Braden Willis making the roster outright. Now that brings us to the offensive line, which this again, kind of like wide receiver, you have your guys you love, your Trent Williams, you have your Jake Brendel, your Dominick Puni, your Colton McKivitz, and your Ben Barches, but a lot of injuries to the room currently, and some guys that maybe shouldn't make the roster, some younger players stepping up in big roles already that could push for a starting job as early as their rookie season, as early as preseason week 2 or 3, and they already are, that being Connor Colby. But the Niners, to me, like a lot of these rooms, is the starters are set. It's the depth that becomes the question mark. And I think Trent's making the roster at left tackle. If he's healthy, Ben Barch will be your left guard this year, which I do think that actually could change depending on what happens with Dominick Puni. Shanahan said it's a possible PCL. I don't know if that means he'll be back by week 1 or by week 3. I don't know. Hopefully it's by week 1 we need him out there, but that would leave with Jake Brendel as your starting center, and then Colton McKivitz as your starting right tackle, with behind that starting 5, if they're all healthy, Spencer Burford at backup left tackle, Connor Colby as your backup left guard and right guard, Austin Pleasance being your backup right tackle, and Matt Hennessy being your backup center and backup guard as well. Although I think Hennessy has strictly played backup center in training camp and preseason, so maybe there is some wiggle room there. I struggled with this group the most out of all of them, maybe outside of the defensive line, because can you squeak Nick Zakelj past waivers? I don't know. He's not great, but another team may say, hey, we're rebuilding. Let's just see if we can kind of pick up some scraps elsewhere. We don't have depth at left guard, at center, right guard. Could Nick Zakelj be a guy they choose to cut? I have him making the practice squad for San Francisco. And I also have them passing along Drake Nugent and Drew Moss through the practice squad as on top of Nick Zakelj. So those are 3 guys I think could pass through waivers, but it's tricky because if you cut one of those guys and one of those guys are gone, especially Drew Moss, you're going to have a pretty upset fan base, where Drew Moss, although has shown some glimpses of some nice things, does have some room to grow still as a rookie. But I don't think Nick Zakelj belongs on the roster when it comes to making the final 53-man spot. That does depend on Dominick Puni's health, though, because I think if Dominick Puni's out for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, however long it may be, Connor Colby becomes your starting right guard, and Nick Zakelj will make the roster outright, which I don't love that, but that kind of seems like it's the case. I do believe, though, they can get Drake Nugent and Drew Moss through waivers on the practice squad. So right now I have, 9 guys as your offensive line. Your starting 5, obviously Trent, Barch, Brendel, Puni, McKivitz. Then your backup 4 being Burford, Colby, Pleasance, Hennessy, with, in my eyes, Zakelj, Moss, and Nugent making the practice squad. Maybe they choose to retain another tackle, whether it be Isaiah Prince or somebody else on the practice squad. Maybe having Zakelj, who can also play center, and Drake Nugent becomes redundant. But again, you have 3 guards on your practice squad. Unfortunately, Ben Barch probably makes you have to have some, I guess, an increased number of guard depth behind him. Khalil Young says, I would cut Nick Zakelj. I've seen enough. I would agree. Just not good. He belongs in that camp of late round draft picks San Francisco loves, takes a chance on, and guys that probably shouldn't be in the NFL. And look, they scouted him for like 6 years and has just never been the player they thought he'd become. Not a starter and barely a reserve. So I would agree with you. Cut Zakelj, and if you can't bring him back, what's the harm, right? That's why I think you cut him and you can move on. But if he gets passed through waivers, you can bring him back on the practice squad, a guy that knows your offense, knows your system, and can hopefully be depth to your depth, if that makes sense, not your actual depth behind your starters. So that's the one way to look at things with Nick Zakelj. Before we go to the defense for a second, I want to pause to kindly ask you to like, share, and subscribe to the show. But also, this promo code right here on your screen, 49ers Access, 49 ERS ACC ESS at SeatGeek.com. Use it there at SeatGeek.com. You can save yourself $20 off your first purchase. Niner tickets, baseball tickets, concert tickets, WNBA tickets, does not matter. Use that promo code there and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. Lori Matthews says in the YouTube comments that Jon Feliciano, former San Francisco 49er guard, said today that the Niners would be his number one choice to come out of retirement. He has said that more than once, and I'm pretty sure he said that at my place of work, that being 95.7 The Game, but I don't know if that's right now, at least, a realistic option for San Francisco. I know that Feliciano has been open about saying I have a handful of teams I'd come back for, San Francisco being, again, the top choice there. But I just don't know if that makes the most sense. I get it. He's proven he's a veteran. He was the right guard for you when you were in the Super Bowl, and had he been healthy in the Super Bowl, maybe things are different and we're celebrating a championship instead of not one right now. So maybe it's an option. I think if Dominick Puni misses time, like a serious amount, I say 10 weeks of time, which it doesn't seem to be the case. He was jogging off the football field on Saturday. So, but if Puni misses like 10 weeks, then I could see them maybe giving Feliciano a call. However, at that point, I think they would just start Connor Colby and kind of hope for the best and retain Zakelj and see where things go. Would that be the smartest move? I don't know. I also have no idea if Jon Feliciano is even in shape. Like, maybe he is, maybe he's not. I haven't talked to him, obviously. If he is in shape, then we can certainly have that conversation now. If he'll come back and be depth for you at a pretty cheap price, why not? I wouldn't mind Feliciano being your left guard this year over Ben Barch, because why not? However, my assumption is he's not in I can play guard for you right now shape. And that to me would kind of dispel some of the interest from San Francisco. They can't afford to just sign somebody and make him wait a month to get himself in shape. So if he's in shape, we can certainly have that conversation, but I don't see him coming back this year, despite how maybe intriguing it is for fans, or even maybe San Francisco's case if Puni's out for a long time. I just don't see Jon Feliciano being brought back this season, but I know fans want it. It just doesn't seem like it's going to be in the cards this year for him. Maybe he goes back to the Giants or the Buffalo Bills, two places he's played before, but San Francisco doesn't feel like they're going to need him this year. I think San Francisco's bigger depth need is at tackle. I am actually a lot more comfortable with Connor Colby as a backup, maybe even starting guard to begin the year over Zakelj, or even over bringing back Jon Feliciano. So I think that's the route they would take. Let's see what Colby's made of. 7th round pick this year and looked pretty good in the preseason and training camp. So that feels like the route they will take. But a good question and good comment from Lori Matthews, one of our favorites here in the YouTube chat. Moving along to the defense, though, because the defense to me has a lot more open spots than the offense. And I think the place that really needs depth, especially right now, is the defensive line. The defensive line currently has Nick Bosa, who has soreness but isn't out, but didn't play against the Raiders. So one guy. Mykel Williams is hurt. CJ West is hurt. Samuel Gawanu is hurt. Yetur Gross-Matos is hurt. They have 5 to 6 guys. Kevin Givens is also hurt. 6 guys on the shelf. Now, they are expecting Mykel Williams back, if not this week, next week. The same thing going for CJ West and Yetur Gross-Matos. So some guys getting back healthy. Hence why I have San Francisco going all in this year on defense. With young defensive players in that room, you have to have an increase of depth behind them, because they're going to struggle. Guys are going to get hurt. And I think San Francisco carries Nick Bosa, Alfred Collins, Mykel Williams, Bryce Huff, CJ West, Evan Anderson, Samuel Kawanu, Yetur Gross-Matos, Jordan Elliott, and Kalia Davis. I have them taking and carrying 5 or 10 defensive linemen this year. I know it sounds like a lot. I know it sounds like 10 double digits. That is the most of any position group on the roster for me. But again, I think the health concerns this room currently has, the depth concerns they have, and the youth they're going to rely on lead me to believe they are going to take and keep 10 defensive linemen in that room. I think they're also going to try to carry 3 guys on the practice squad this year, that being Robert Beal Jr., Sebastian Valdez, and Mykel Brown. Again, I think they just need that amount of depth where, again, a lot of guys are hurt currently. I have Kevin Givens being placed on injured reserve to begin the year. And I think that San Francisco would value 10 defensive linemen, where you go back 2021, they carried almost 10 guys that entire year, and it really paid off for them, where they didn't have the guy opposite Bosa. They had a lot of guys that kind of pitched in to help that defense be great. And I think they're going to take that route where, like, in 3 years' time, if Mykel and West and Collins have grown into bona fide, like, star players, that won't be the case. But year one, you have 2 guys that have hyperextensions in their knee. Yetur Gross-Matos also has a knee injury, which, again, those guys should be back by week 1. However, you got to have bodies, and if bodies start dropping, you got to have bodies behind them to hopefully kind of stabilize you until those guys can come back. And so I think 10 defensive linemen, beef up that room. Like, you brought back Saleh for a reason. You gave him 11 draft picks for a reason and said, take 7 of them, go. Give him the keys to what this defense will need, where this team is going to be led more so by the offense this year. Purdy, McCaffrey, Kittle, Pearsall, Jennings. Once they're healthy, Brandon Aiyuk, once he's back from being suspended, Demarcus Robinson, the offense should be able to pick up their end of the bargain. But whereas the defense will have more questions to answer this year, in my opinion. So keep 10 defensive linemen. You can mix and match. Like, think about this. You can have Bosa on one edge, Bryce Huff on one edge, Mykel on the interior, Yetur Gross-Matos on the interior, or on the exterior too. Samuel Kawanu. You so many guys that will be mixed in and out. And you give Saleh and Chris Kocurek so many weapons to work with and matchups to kind of tee off on. That, to me, is going to be one of the keys of helping this young defense grow and have success early, where it's almost like the more the merrier. Like, you can use the baseball terminology of, like, hey, you may have 3 or 4 or 5 good hitters, but you have to have the rest of your roster be able to play. Like, most baseball teams want to have 2 to 3 utility players on their roster, the guy that can play. Like, the Dodgers are great at this, right? Where you have one guy that can play center, second, short, third. Like, Mookie Betts can play all 3 outfield spots, second base and shortstop, right? Max Muncy can play third base, second base, and first base, right? You have Dalton Rushing, their backup catcher, can play first base and the outfield. You have so many guys that can move around and give your defense, your coaches, a better opportunity to mix and match, find the matchups they like, and find, like, what works best. Where, if late in the year Mykel's crushing it, West is crushing it, you may not have to have Jordan Elliott out there too much, which certainly helps you. But I think this team needs to almost give those young guys a longer runway while also having depth behind them. We're like, hey, if we're losing games because Alfred Collins isn't great, that's why you have Jordan Elliott, Evan Anderson behind those guys, and maybe even a Sebastian Valdez be a practice squad elevation per week by week. So again, I have them taking 10 defensive linemen on the actual 53-man roster, 3 on the practice squad, and I have Kevin Givens on IR. So 4 defensive linemen on IR / the practice squad behind their guys, and just kind of giving them a full frontal attack on the defense in the front 7 to help these young roster hopefully exceed the expectations set for them this season. Moving to the second group in the front 7, the linebacking core. I have 5 linebackers making the roster this year. I think your starters will be Fred Warner, D. Winters, and Tatum Bethune, with Nicholas Martin and Luke Gifford behind them. I think Nick Martin and Luke Gifford serve as the special teams guys, while Gifford is the backup for Bethune if he struggles. I also have them keeping Stone Blanton, a UDFA standout they liked coming out of college this year. And I have good old Jalen Graham returning to the practice squad. I really wanted to bring back Curtis Robinson this year, but unfortunately, he is 4 years in to his career. Thus, he's no longer on the veteran list to make the practice squad and would count against other veteran guys you want to bring back, whereas Graham and Blanton wouldn't. So that's why I prefer to have Curtis Robinson out there, but depending on how they view the defense, I don't think he can make it past waivers and or to the practice squad. Joseph Ehrenberg says in the YouTube chat, trade Brown, Jauan Jennings in a pick to the Jets for Malachi Corley and Breece Hall. No. You're not trading Jauan Jennings for... Well, first off, the Jets aren't doing that. You want to trade Ji'Ayir Brown to the Jets? We can certainly... I am open to that big time. I don't have it happening here in this prediction, but I can see it being a case for, getting a pick. But I don't think San Francisco is going to go out and get Breece Hall or Malachi Corley. They do want a receiver, which, again, to your point, could be Malachi Corley. But in this case, they wanted a smaller, speedy, 6-foot receiver that kind of fits the Jordan Watkins mold of a guy. That, to me, doesn't scream Corley, who had a really bad year last season as a rookie and does not fit that skill set whatsoever. I also think New York's not going to be cutting just second-year pros and guys they think or view as their RB1 or 2 to begin the year. They want to give Justin Fields the arsenal around him to get things done, especially on the ground where Fields is probably a better player overall than through the air, whereas they would not take Jauan Jennings, who wants to get paid. They'd rather be the one to pay him in the offseason once he proves to be healthy again. So, no, that's not going to happen. However, Ji'Ayir Brown getting traded to New York may be a case of a realistic possibility closer to roster cutdown day. And Kyle Chipto says here, the wide receiver core is better than last year. Yeah, way better. Way better than last year. Without a doubt, even with Aiyuk being hurt, this Pearsall being a kind of looking like a big year 2 jump ahead of him, Demarcus Robinson, just those two guys being out there on a consistent basis will ultimately upgrade this room, even with missing maybe Jauan and Aiyuk for a couple of weeks. And then Filthy Casual asks, has Martin done any special teams? Well, if he hasn't, you better get used to it because he's not starting. So if he wants to play in any capacity, he will learn to play special teams. I believe he's done so minimally in college, albeit he missed last year with torn ACL. But that's kind of the route to take because he's not, and maybe this changes. Like if Martin comes out and is like blowing us away against Los Angeles this next weekend in the preseason finale, then maybe we can have our, kind of change our tune on him. That said, I think Bethune is your starting linebacker on base downs this season. Martin may come along quickly, but not right now. But if he wants to play, he will learn punt, kick coverages very quickly, very quickly. Big Brick 84 says, trade Ji'Ayir Brown, Trey Brown, Yetur Gross-Matos, and Daryl Luter Jr. Get what you can for them from whoever will give you something in return. Yes on Ji'Ayir Brown. No one's trading for Trey Brown. No one's trading for Yetur Gross-Matos. Daryl Luter Jr., I'm open to trading. I think teams will bite on a young cornerback that's yet to kind of get true playing time. But you'll see where where San Francisco's secondary rounds out in the next few minutes or so. And Joseph Ehrenberg also says here, paying Jauan Jennings will be a terrible decision. This cold following for a slow receiver has gotten out of hand. He had one good season. I would push back on Jauan only having one good season. I think Jauan has been used sparingly in his first couple of years, but has always been a major factor in some of the biggest games they played. Had the big touchdown catch against the Rams week 18 in 2021. Obviously, came on strong in 2022, then broke out in 2023 in the Super Bowl, and then last year having a near 1,000-yard season. So I would say that there is a clear ascension to Jauan Jennings, but my biggest fear is that he's hurt. That is my fear of like, hey, I love Jauan, the skill set, depending on the money he wants, which I don't think is $22 million a year. That's asinine. No one's giving him that, whether it's San Francisco or somebody else on the open market. But if he wants $12 million and can prove he's healthy, I'd be open to that. But again, that calf is terrifying to me. And so that's the reason why I would not pay Jauan. Not because of his production. That to me is worth paying. But the injury, that is the one thing where I'm like, X out, end negotiations now. Wait and see, essentially, is how I would play things if I was San Francisco. Let's move on to the cornerback room, because I have 6 guys making the roster, and it's not too different than my first prediction entering the preseason, because I have Lenoir, Bernardo Green, and Upton Stout as your starting 3 cornerbacks this year. I have Green and Lenoir playing on the outside. I have Upton Stout winning the nickelback job out of preseason in his rookie year. Then I have Dallas Flowers as the number 3 outside cornerback and number 4 cornerback as a whole. Behind him, I have Chase Lucas as the backup nickelback, and I still have Trey Brown making the roster, although being the 4th outside cornerback. And to be honest with you, I went back and forth as to whether Jacob Robinson or Siren Neal should make this roster. Now, Neal comes more into play because of, one, he can play cornerback and safety. Could that move somebody else off the roster like a Ji'Ayir Brown? Maybe. Which Siren Neal's played pretty well for San Francisco thus far in his first offseason with the team. Then Jacob Robinson. I am skeptical they can get him past the waivers. But I just don't know if they're going to cut Trey Brown. I think they like the veteran presence that Trey Brown brings to the cornerback room. I think they value Dallas Flowers as kind of the backup kick returner, which I think he's going to win that job, with Junior Bergen being the number 1, Flowers being the 2. I think they do want to have another guy play outside for them, and I'm not sure if they believe they can trust Jacob Robinson just yet. Maybe there's a case to be made, and I'm all ears for this, to cut Trey Brown and make sure Robinson is able to not have to go to waivers or be claimed by somebody else, make him make the roster outright, and then maybe have kind of a back, behind closed doors deal with Trey Brown to bring him back after roster cut down days over with. But right now, I'm going to work under the assumption that guys will be brought back via the practice squad. So I have right now a Trey Brown making the roster over Jacob Robinson and Siren Neal, but I have both those guys being brought back via the practice squad. So some much needed depth in that room for San Francisco, but I also have 2 practice squad guys that can maybe give you something more so Siren Neal this year than Robinson, but Robinson's been a very nice standout for them. So again, I'm all ears for cutting Trey Brown, backdoor deal, bring him back via the practice squad, via the elevation for 3 games, and then have Robinson make the roster outright. Because once the year starts, you're not going to have guys getting claimed too much. Really, the post-roster cutdown day claim process really comes from guys that teams wanted to draft during this past year's draft, or guys that they value at positions they value. So usually week 2 or 3, that kind of dies down. But we shall see what the Niners do. But I do not have Jacob Robinson or Siren Neal making the roster currently, which brings me to the safety room. Because We have many comments already saying trade Ji'Ayir Brown. Right now, I have the starting safeties being Jason Pinnock and rookie Marquise Siegel. That's right. San Francisco will have Marquise Siegel and Upton Stout starting for them in the secondary. I also have rookies Mykel Williams and CJ West, barring their own health, starting on the defensive line. So 4 rookies starting on defense for San Francisco. Then I have none starting for them on offense, unless Connor Colby gets a start with Bart and maybe Puni being off. So you may see 5 rookies starting as early as week 1 for San Francisco, which isn't too shabby. It's scary, but isn't too shabby for an 11-pick draft class. That said, Pinnock and Siegel started safety for San Francisco to begin the season. I have Richie Grant as the backup, with Malik Mustafa being on the IR/PUP list to begin the year as he recovers from an ACL injury. I also have rookie Derek Canteen making the practice squad. You just want to have another body in there in case someone goes down. Or in this case, you trade Ji'Ayir Brown, which I do not have San Francisco as we speak trading Ji'Ayir Brown. I think he makes the roster. I think, although there has been a downtrend in play the last couple years, or last year, excuse me, and maybe not so great play in the preseason, I do think that in a new system for him, young guy, feels pressure, I think he's better served as not starting. I think as a depth guy, maybe the direct backup safety, he can play in the box at times and maybe not be relied upon in coverage too much. Whereas, and don't forget, Grant and Pinnock both have heel injuries, which could certainly make Brown making the roster more of a lock than not, which I do think may be the case. However, I do believe that if Malik Mustafa was healthy, Ji'Ayir Brown would be traded. Like, that is, to me, a clear and obvious decision to make, where if Mustafa was healthy right now, they'd be making calls about trading Ji'Ayir Brown, but that's not the case. Maybe if Mustafa comes back before the trade deadline, that can certainly be worked out, but by that point in time, guys go down, things change so fast. But I do not have San Francisco trading Ji'Ayir Brown. I have Ji'Ayir Brown making the roster as one of the backup safeties behind Pinnock and Marquise Siegel to begin the year. Bobo says they should have kept Talanoa Hufanga instead of Ji'Ayir Brown. Can I be upfront and honest with you, Bobo? Talanoa Hufanga was not good last year. The coverage skills were a massive, massive issue for him. The run defense, okay, I get it. Energy, tongue and tiger. You love the aura and the energy Hufanga brings to the defense, and I will not disagree with you there. However, I would rather have Jason Pinnock and Marquise Siegel and Malik Mustafa and Ji'Ayir Brown in my safety room currently than Talanoa Hufanga, simply based on price tag. He got paid by Denver, which is awesome for him. I'm happy for him. I loved having Hufanga on the defense. Former second-team All-Pro, a lot of big plays. I go back to the interception against the Rams Monday Night Football. What a great play. But he's not the player he once was. The coverage skills aren't great. And the injuries are starting to pile up to a point where he's starting to slow down too. So I get it. There is some emotional feelings towards Hufanga, but overall, I think it was a smart move to let him walk. And Ji'Ayir Brown's in year 3 of a 4-year contract as a 3rd-round pick. If he's great, awesome. He's cheap, and he's a good safety at that point. But if he's bad, you don't lose much in cutting him or trading him. So there was pretty clear and obvious reasons as to why they let Hufanga go. And honestly, the defense may have got better when he got hurt in 2023 too, with Ji'Ayir Brown and Gibson on the back end. That said, I don't trust Ji'Ayir Brown in coverage either. So that's why I don't believe he'll be a starter this year. And I think he is a candidate to get traded, maybe to the Jets. I think that's a very good possibility that happens this offseason. But right now, with the injuries they currently have and guys on the shelf, I think Ji'Ayir Brown makes the roster. But let's move to my final positional group, that being special teams. And I think I know what's going to happen. We have Thomas Morestead, the jacked punter, making the roster for sure. We have Jon Weeks as the 39-year-old ageless wonder at the long snapper position, making the roster. And then we have Jake, the I can make at times 59-yard game-winning field goals, Moody, as your kicker for 2025. I'm still not sure where the fan base sits with Jake Moody. I don't know if they like him, love him, still want to see more from him. It feels like it's kind of been scattered where a 5 for 6 is nothing to complain about from him. Albeit you could say, had you made the one earlier, you wouldn't have been in that spot to begin with, but that is semantics. That said, I do think Jake will make the roster, and hopefully he can turn a corner. He is and will be your kicker for at least 1 week of the regular season, and maybe they'll keep Greg Joseph on speed dial, but it certainly feels like that Jake Moody is the guy, and I'm not shocked. That felt like it was always going to be the outcome. But fingers crossed it works out for San Francisco, because every time he jogs out there, we are biting our nails, grinding our teeth, and just praying for the best. But Niner Media says, "What's up, Sterling?" And he also says, "Wide receiver and running back is tough to predict." I don't think it's actually that tough. I already talked about it, but I'll go back for you in this case. I have Christian McCaffrey, Isaac Guerendo, Jordan James, and Patrick Taylor Jr. making the roster, with Corey Kiner maybe being an injured reserve guy or a practice squad stash for a whole year. I think that could be the case with a high ankle sprain. Then I have Jeff Wilson Jr. being the backup practice squad running back on the team. And for receiver, I have Jauan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, Jordan Watkins, Russell Gage, Junior Bergen, with Aiyuk and Robinson being on the IR pup/suspended list. And then I have Robbie Chosen Anderson as the lone practice squad wide receiver. If Watkins is out for a chunk of time, maybe they keep Isaiah Hodgins, but I think that's a pretty clear-cut answer for you. Hopefully I'm right, which if I'm wrong, hey, what can I say? It's a tough job to do, but I will quickly run down the entire roster for you, because I do want to let all of you know that Brock Purdy, Mac Jones are your quarterback. Curtis Rourke is the IR/pup stash for the season, with Carter Bradley on the practice squad. I already said running backs: McCaffrey, Guerendo, James, Taylor Jr. make the roster. Corey Kiner and Jeff Wilson Jr. are IR/practice squad candidates. Kyle Juszczyk is your fullback. Receiver is Jauan Jennings, Pearsall, Cowing, Watkins, Gage, Bergen. Aiyuk and Robinson being pup/IR/suspension list candidates. And then Robbie Chosen Anderson is your practice squad veteran on the team. A tight end is George Kittle, Luke Farrell, and Braden Willis, with Jake Tonjes being the practice squad tight end. The offensive line is Trent Williams, Ben Barch, Jake Brendel, Dominick Puni, Colton McKivitz, Spencer Burford as your backup left tackle, Connor Colby as your backup left guard, right guard, Austin Pleasance being your backup right tackle, and Matt Hennessy being your backup center. I have Nick Zakelj, Drew Moss, and Drake Nugent as the 3 practice squad players, with on defense being Nick Bosa, Alfred Collins, Mykel Williams, Bryce Huff, CJ West, Evan Anderson, Samuel Kawanu, Yetur Gross-Matos, Jordan Elliott, and Kalia Davis being your 10. Yes, 10 defensive linemen making the roster, with Robert Beal Jr., Sebastian Valdez, and Shaquille Brown as your 3 practice squad players, and Kevin Givens being placed on injured reserve. At linebacker, I have Fred Warner, D. Winters, and Tatum Bethune being your starter, with Nick Martin and Luke Gifford as your backups, with Stone Blanton, a standout UDFA, and Jalen Graham on the practice squad. At cornerback, I have Lenoir, Green, and Stout as your starters, with Flowers, Lucas, and Trey Brown as your backups, with Jacob Robinson, Siren Neal on the practice squad, and safety being Ji'Ayir Brown, Jason Pinnock, Richie Grant, and Marquise Siegel, with Derek Canteen making the practice squad and Malik Mustafa on the pup list to begin the year. Then, of course, Special teams. Jake Moody. Jon Weeks. Thomas Morestead. Coward Chipto said I skipped over running back. McCaffrey, Guerendo, James, Taylor Jr. There you go. Yeah. Talk about a comment to end the show here. Generic user says, the Niners will miss Devondre Campbell. What a great comment to end a Monday evening show. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Thank you to Generic User with the hot take to end the show. Niner Media, Big Brick 84, Kawachipto, Jedi, Lori Matthews, Strawberry, Bobo, Joseph Ernberg, and many, many more. Yeah, Filthy Casual, Niners Throwback. Again, Kali Young also as well. Tommy Huxley, Ferry, how's it going, brother? Hope you're having a great Monday evening. And yeah, that's it for the show. Hope you have enjoyed the show. And I also hope you guys can like, share, and subscribe. Leave us a 5-star audio podcast review. It is the cheapest, freest, and easiest way to help us grow. And you can also follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the X or Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. And use this promo code right here on screen, 49ers Access, 49ERS ACCESS at SeatGeek.com to save yourself $20 off your first purchase. That is it for my second edition of my 53-man roster predictions. Did one at the end of training camp, doing one right now in the midst of the preseason, and we'll do one just before roster cut down day next week, August 26th. It's almost here. San Francisco and the players do not have much time to prove themselves. Can Darrell Luter Jr., can Ji'Ayir Brown, can Nick Zakelj, can Drew Moss, can a wide receiver prove themselves in the next week and a half or so? We shall see as time goes on, but until next time, my name is Sterling Bennett, and as always, stay faithful.